on, what is this StreamYard? I've not heard of this one before.
Now we got to edit that out. Now I got to figure out how to edit that out. All right, it's Zach TV. I'm with Robert Miller, who is a famous jazz musician. In fact, at one point, I can't believe this. You're like a late bloomer, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I mean, after a lot of work, you end up with a #1 album on the charts. We'll get to that in a second. We have Project Grand Slam. We have the East Side Sessions. Before we go any further, before we start talking about this, that, and the other thing, I want to play what is called the sizzle reel. Just got to play it.
Town in order to even the score.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I'm going to play a little later on. I'm Falling Off the World because it was the first video that I saw when I went to your site, which is fantastic. I mean, as far as sites go, you can see it for yourself, projectgrandslam.com. Just, one of those things that you have to visit on a regular basis and check out all the videos and everything that's going on with Robert Miller. How did you like that for a quick promo? How I did that on Zach Martin TV and, as opposed to radio.
It's kind of like you get the whole album in 1 minute. How's that?
That's fantastic. So, you're not wasting your money. One thing I cannot stand is when I go see a movie, for instance, Robert Miller, and I'm thinking, this movie's going to be so funny. And all the funny bits were in the promo. I think, why did I just pay $15 to see this? Same thing goes with an album. You hear the one cut and then you buy the rest of the album. I mean, when I was a kid, it might have been $18. It's a lot of money for me in the 80s. I'm thinking to myself, this album sucks. Not so with your albums.
Well, I appreciate that. Those days are long gone. You can't charge $18 for an album anymore.
No, you can't. I mean, you're lucky if you get $1 a track, and then after Apple gets their cut, you get 2 cents, maybe. How does that work?
The world has changed radically. Now, it used to be that you toured in order to sell albums. Now you basically give albums away in order to tour.
And now you can't even tour because of COVID-19.
That's exactly right. What a world we have.
This is correct me if I'm using this properly. This Meshuggah COVID-19 is making me Meshug. Did I do it right?
It's making me verklempt.
Verklempt as well. It's just crazy because a lot of people and performers on Broadway, for another example, they've actually been economically devastated by this whole COVID-19, the lockdown, the house arrest, as we call it, the quarantine. Things are starting to lighten up. But as we look towards the remainder of 2020, it's not until 2021 when Broadway opens up and when we start to, I guess, get back to some sort of concert season. Robert Miller, as you look towards 2021, what would you like to forecast how that'll go for you and for others?
Well, you're 100% right, Zach. The world right now is completely locked up for artists. We had so many things scheduled for this summer. We had a European tour. We were scheduled to perform at several different festivals in the US and outside the country. And obviously, we had to cancel, or they canceled everything on us. Um, and insofar as when will that change? Well, nobody really knows. I mean, we talk about 2021 like everybody knows that it'll be opened up by then. As you said, Broadway is closed until the end of the year, but nobody knows for sure when it's going to open up. And unfortunately, it looks like anything that's got a crowd related to it is going to be probably the last that's going to open up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Well,
it's
I have a prediction about 2021, and I know it's going to come true. You ready?
I'm waiting.
2021. I could say this with 100% accuracy. It's going to be true. 2021 is going to be an odd year.
You're right about that. It's an odd world. So, look, the only thing we can do as artists is try to continue to be creative. I've been holed up in my bunker like everybody else, and we were fortunate. East Side Sessions, which is the album that you were focusing on, is something that we finished literally a week or so before the world closed down, and it was just fortunate timing. We recorded it in January, and I mixed it quickly because that's the way I like to do things. So by the time, let's say, February 1st came around, the album was finished. We didn't actually release it until the end of July because, you're always waiting and putting together promotion and et cetera, as well as the various videos that you referred to from the album. Um, but once the coronavirus hit, and everything was canceled, then the question became, well, what are we going to do now? And what I started doing is I just kept writing material. I'm holed up in my little underground bunker. I'm writing like crazy. I'm trying to record on my own remotely and pass it around to my various musicians who record remotely and send it back. It's a completely different way of working than we're used to, but when in Rome, what else are you going to do?
Well, I pretty much have taken the same approach as you. I'm broadcasting from the Rock and Roll Bunker, located 40 feet beneath the radio station. I'm surrounded by radioactive biscuits and box water. This was built, as you can see, in 1957 with big lead doors. I got my rock hives. I got my reel-to-reel player, student number one, student number two turntables, and a plethora of microphones, plus 8-track players that I got from my 72 Triumph Spitfire, as well as my 73 Mercury Cougar with the 351 Cleveland. What I'm wondering is why my parents let me drive those cars. And the only thing I can think of is they wanted to write one of us off the books because we were just too expensive to raise.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah, so that's why we're at the point we're at. I've been exploring all the technology. I've been working from home. I've been doing my voiceovers. I've been playing with microphones. I found something that I've always wanted to do is get a Shure 55. You might remember those microphones from the band hall days.
I had one.
Yeah, and I had to get one at Guitar Center. During the start of the pandemic, I needed extra mic cables because get a load of this. I did not know this, Robert Miller, but apparently mic cables don't last 20 years. I had a box of mic cables and I'm thinking, how come these things won't work? What are you kidding me? I get on the phone with people like, Zach, nothing lasts for 20 years, especially mic cables. You got to get new cables. So that turned into a thing and I got the cables. And then I realized that my computers are too slow. I'm just going to tell you exactly how I handled this. Computers are too slow. So then I had to think to myself, how could I get around this without spending $5,000 on a great computer? I'm like, the computer at my studio at WFAN is not being used right now. So call engineering. They'll give it to you. I called engineering. They gave me a pushback. I said, but I need it. So I went over there and I picked it up and I took it home. So that's what I'm doing now.
Something you mentioned about microphones. All the rehearsal studios were in a tizzy because nobody, of course, could use them for the longest time. And on top of that, the question became, okay, how do they make them as safe as possible when they were finally allowed to open up? So they all have now required that the musicians come in with their own microphones.
Okay, that
It
makes
used to be
sense.
that you'd go into a studio, it would be outfitted with all the amplifiers and everything else that you would need. But now you have to go out and buy your own microphone. And you mentioned the Shure microphone. That was something that I had in my band when I was 16 years old. We used to schlep that around.
Yeah. And it's a good thing to schlep around. It's a great microphone and it's got some really good sound qualities to it. That's perfect for your genre of music, right? Right now I'm on a Sennheiser. That's one over here, but I like this idea of bringing your own mics in because when I think of all of the different people that I've worked with in my radio career who just let's just say that I would question if they even took showers to begin with or used scope. They would leave that nasty mic sock smelling really bad. So I think COVID-19 has forced us to really think about how we move forward and hygiene and all of those things. But you know
Personal.
something, I'm making lemonade out of lemons. That's what I'm doing.
Well, look, it's a different world for sure. And as I said, nobody knows exactly when and if it's going to change. The good news is that I've been writing like crazy. I've written a brand new album's worth of material, and I've been recording it. And this time around, I decided that I'm going to step out and I'm going to do all the singing. So this is going to probably be a Robert Miller album when it comes out.
Okay, Robert Miller solo. I like to take a little bit of a moment. I don't know if you're aware of this, Robert Miller, but Dr. Pepper is one of my favorite drinks. Diet Dr. Pepper. They're not a sponsor or anything like this, but I understand that through this COVID-19 crisis, that there's a shortage of Dr. Pepper in Texas. I have about 5 cases. Therefore, I'm willing to sell one of mine at an exorbitant rate to anybody listening in Texas right now. So if you need Dr. Pepper, send me a Z-mail. You can find me. Just figured I'd put that out there. Listen, it's the American way to try to make something out of nothing.
That's right. Look at all the guys that hoarded the stuff at the beginning of the pandemic. They tried to make a fortune off of it.
And I get what, yeah, the one guy that they seized all his stuff, and I thought to myself, that's really not American because the politicians do this stuff all the time, and they get awards for that. They get presidential medals of freedom, and yet the one guy out in the middle of nowhere who obviously is doing the wrong thing, he gets everything taken away from him, and they don't even give him the money for it. Not fair, not right, Robert. It's again,
Don't ask me why this reminded me of this, but many, many years ago, there was a guy that bought a pristine, unused ticket to Woodstock, and it cost him something like $20,000. This is after the event, thinking that he had something that was a collector's item, and it was a collector's item until they found out that there was a safe in upstate New York that had about 10,000 of these unused tickets in them. So sometimes the best laid plans.
I agree with you on that. There's so many questions that I could ask you, and we spent the first 13 minutes just hamming it up and having a conversation like guys do. I do believe that I had you in the studio right before the pandemic broke out, right? I had you
Yep,
in New York City talking
yep,
about
yep.
Project Grand Slam. We had a good time then. And I said, well, come on back in a few weeks. Well, it's been a few months, but in a new venue, which is really exciting to me to do this TV kind of stuff. It's adds new dimension. At the same time, I realize I have a fat face and my hair doesn't look good on tele. Like you look great on TV. So I have to put a ball cap on. And then I've been watching videos of other people broadcasting from home, and they're pretty much doing the same things as me. So I don't feel so bad.
Well, you got a Yankees hat on at least.
Yeah, I mean, at least it's not a loser Mets hat. And then that's another thing. They were figuring out how are we going to have baseball games with no fans in the stands. And I said, well, ask the Mets. They do that all the time.
Oof.
All right, Robert. Before you started recording your albums, you have a bit of a history. And the reason why I want to go over this today is because while people are stuck at home and while they're evaluating and reevaluating what they might do now forward, especially if they lost their job because of COVID-19, I think now's the time to like do it, whatever it is you really wanted to do, no matter what it is. If you're in your 50s and 60s and you always wanted to be a medical doctor, why the heck not? You might as well. you're only going to get older anyway. Or if you want to be a lawyer, you of which I think at one point you were a lawyer. Take us through the process of going to, hi, I'm Robert Miller and I'm running a label, or hi, I'm Robert Miller, attorney at law, and now I'm going to become a musician, and I think my parents are going to kill me.
Well, you almost got it completely correct. I started out playing music. That's what I wanted to do. That's all I ever wanted to do. And I had been a broadcasting and film major in college. I
What a
graduated
waste.
college, and I got a job in a television station up in Boston, WGBH, which is the public television station up there. And I got in the only way that guys were able to get into the station at that time, through the mailroom. So my career, as it was working in the mailroom during the day and playing jazz at night in the various clubs in Boston. And that was supposed to continue for a couple of months until I made my way out of the mailroom and into production, which is what I wanted to do in television. Except at that time, they weren't promoting anybody. There weren't any openings and nothing was happening. So I was just stuck in the mailroom forever. And a friend of mine said to me, well, why don't you do like the guy who is the leader of your band is doing? Now, the leader of my band at that time was a guy from South Africa who was a medical doctor, and he played jazz. And he was a great musician and a great doctor too. So I said, what, are you crazy? You want me to become a doctor? He said, well, why don't you think of becoming a lawyer? I said, well, why would I do that? He said, because you could do law during the day and you could play jazz at night. And I thought about it for about a nanosecond. And I said, oh, okay, that sounds good. And that's the entire reason why I went to law school and became a lawyer, which turned out from a musical perspective to be about the worst mistake I could have made, because, there's a phrase that says the law is a jealous mistress. And it's completely true. I mean, you just have no time between school and then after you get out, you're starting a career and blah, blah, blah. And I was out of music for about 15 years, and it killed me. And finally, just through luck, I got back into music through what I call a musician's dating service. They used to have this thing in New York City where you went down to this studio, it was fully equipped. And if you said to them, I want to play Led Zeppelin's third album, The Second Side, they would find two other idiots that wanted to play the same thing. And they'd put you in a room and that's what you'd play. And that's how I got back into playing music. And one thing led to another. And I got introduced to a recording studio. And it so happened that the guy that owned the recording studio grew up on the same block that I grew up on. And we had been friends, and I hadn't seen the guy in 20, 30 years. But from that little start, that's how I got back into music professionally. And from there, I formed the Robert Miller Group, and we played various festivals around the country, in Telluride, New Mexico, for example, Telluride, Colorado, rather, and California, in New York, et cetera, et cetera. Started to record. From that, I actually formed a record label. That's a whole other experience. If you ever want to think of something that's probably the worst thing you could do from an economic point of view, form your own record label.
Or your own radio station.
Probably the same kind of thing. No, actually,
exactly the same thing.
In the late 1990s, I formed a record label called 32 Records. We named it 32 because, and you're a sports fan, I can see the hat. Some of the greatest players in all the various sports wore that number. In fact, I'm going to give you a little quiz on the air here, Zach. In 1963, there were 4 MVPs in the NFL, the AFL, the American League, and the National League, all of whom wore the number 32. And if you or your fans can get that answer, there's got to be some kind of a free thing for you.
Even with Google, I could cheat and look that up, but 32. And what year? 65?
63,
63.
1963. Anyway,
I mean,
the
yeah,
answer is in the American League, it was Elston Howard from the Yankees. In the
okay.
National League, it was Sandy Koufax of the Dodgers. In the NFL, it was Jim Brown of the Cleveland Browns. And the tough one, the one that nobody gets, in the AFL, it was Cookie Gilchrist of the Buffalo Bills. How's that for an interesting trivia question?
That's really good. I mean, and well,
Anyway, we formed
it's
32
easy to
records.
remember when you actually saw it happening, Robert, not bring an age into it.
You are there. We formed 32 records, and we unfortunately we had a big hit, and I'll tell you why. The big hit was we had bought some music that had been pre-recorded by another label, some kind of B-level jazz, and my partner and I put it out on a new compilation record that we called Jazz for a Rainy Afternoon. And one of the investors in our company at that time was the guy that ran Elle magazine, the big fashion magazine. So we went over to see the guy, and he said to us, you know, what's your idea? What are you going to do? And we said, well, we'd love to borrow some photos from you if we could. And on the desk, he had a photo of a gorgeous woman, half naked, holding an umbrella in the rain. And my partner looked at it and said, Jazz for a Rainy Afternoon. So we put, you know, about 12 tracks of this B-level jazz on that record with that cover, and it sold 1 million records.
Because of the cover or because of the music?
It was completely the cover, okay? Completely. And then we went on from there to do jazz for the open road, jazz for the quiet times, jazz for this, jazz for that. At one time, I kid you not, in the late 90s, 1999, we had the top 5 albums on the Billboard Jazz chart. And everybody in the industry looked at it and said, you know, who are these guys? And then they said to themselves, wait a minute, we got much better jazz than they do. I mean, we've got Miles Davis, we've got John Coltrane, you know, we had, Haim Yankel playing jazz.
Listen, Haim Yankel is one of the best underrated of
He's
all
one
time.
of the best, right?
Yeah.
So they went out and they got even sexier photos and they ripped off our idea completely. So basically it put us out of business, but that was okay. We had our run.
Yeah, I think Herb Alpert probably did the best of all of them. I remember that album cover. Remember?
You're talking about Whipped Cream and other
Yes.
delights.
Yes, exactly. He went for it and beat everybody else.
Every teenage boy's favorite album in the 90s.
Yeah, and the music. Well, yeah. All right. I'm not going to comment on the music, but it didn't matter whether it sucked or not. There was every little boy's favorite, right? So
Anyway,
now you have.
That was my experience in the record business, and thankfully we sold the label just before this little thing called Napster came out, which ultimately was the demise of the record business.
Yeah, I was talking to a couple of artists about this very issue about Napster and what people do to find music. And most of us do the same thing if we really want it. And there's some clicking going on your end, Robert. I don't know what's going on with your phone. All right.
I don't know if it's the phone, but I do hear a little bit of that.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'll just talk over it. Then we'll play your video, and that'll chew up the rest of the time. Hey, I do remember many times going on YouTube and having what they call a clip grabber and just getting the songs I want and then playing them on the air. I mean, if the labels aren't going to make sure that a guy like me has the music to play, I'm not going to pay to play it. I'm just going to go find it and play it on the air, and hopefully the artist benefits from that. But it goes back to where we started. I mean, nowadays the whole model has changed to where you have to go out on the road. You have to gig in order to make your money. It's not by album sales. It's not by royalties. I mean, you probably get a royalty check every now and then for 6 cents. Isn't that, by the way, it's so annoying when you get those.
You're correct. And from my point of view, I don't really mind the economics. Okay. I'm at a certain stage in life where that's not what I'm aiming for. My goal is to spread my music and have the biggest audience that I can. And the problem is that the audience now is confined to the streaming services. Nobody buys CDs. In fact, there's nobody that I know that even has a CD player anymore.
I
Um,
do.
the last vestige of that, when you used to buy a new car, they used to give you the souped up, audio, and there was always a CD player. Nowadays, the souped up audio does not have a CD
Right.
player.
Yeah.
So nobody has a CD player. Nobody downloads anymore. The whole idea of downloading from Apple is gone. That's gone. iTunes is gone. So what are you left with? You're left with Spotify and Apple Music, and unfortunately, again, most of the people that access those services, they're not paying for them. It's
No,
all free.
that's right.
But going back to Napster was the first one that figured out, well, everything on a CD is an electronic file. We can just separate and rip off and take the electronic files and separate them. And they were trading them. And of course, the record labels made the mistake of going after these kids and suing them, and that didn't work.
No.
But what they found was that, okay, now you no longer were selling 12 song albums or 12 song CDs. Now everything was focused on the individual track. And even when iTunes was around, as you pointed out earlier, what were you getting? You're getting 99 cents a track, of which the artist was getting, let's say 65 cents. But how many tracks would you have to sell to pay your rent? I mean, it was crazy.
Well, Paul McCartney figured it out, but we're right back to where we started with the 45s. Remember, we had the little box, and there was all the 45s and the jackets and all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
And then we migrated over to the LP. All right. With that in mind, here's the good part about it. Vinyl's making a comeback. It's a billion-dollar industry again. It's fun to collect the works of art that you get with the album. So, in one essence, we're back to where we started again. And another side of the model, it's gone too far, to which the CEO of Spotify said if artists want to make money, what they need to do is make sure that they are constantly giving us more content. And I looked at the picture of the CEO of Spotify, and I'm the last person to comment on anybody's looks, but I thought to myself, my goodness, this guy. Now, you know what? I can't say it because I don't want to get sued. I just thought he pissed me off by the way he presented. Basically, everybody should do the work to make me the money. I have
Well,
a hard time
think
with that. I
about it.
really have a hard time with that.
Spotify is worth billions of dollars.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can't wait to see them go out of business.
The record labels, in order to make a deal with Spotify, in order for Spotify to access their catalogs, they gave equity to the major record labels. So the major record labels have enjoyed the run up in value
Oh,
of
I see.
Spotify. Meanwhile, the poor artists,
Right.
I get paid, I kid you not, 0.00435 cents, 0.00435 cents per stream.
Right. And
That's
and
the
this guy wants you
reimbursement
to.
rate.
Yeah, but it's your fault you're not making the money. You have to give them more content.
Well,
It-
I can give
It's
them as much
ridiculous.
content as I want, but I still have to have people directed to that content. And by
I
the way, Spotify has a black box system where, I don't know, somebody told me there's something like 50,000 new tunes that are released every day, and Spotify has a bunch of gnomes that basically decide who's going to get put onto the Spotify playlist. Those are the only
Yeah.
playlists that count.
Well, all I can tell you is every dog has its day, and I never thought Sears and Roebuck would go out of business. So I hate to sound this way, but I'm really rooting for them to fail.
Well, I would love to see another system. I'd love to see a system where the art that is created is valued. And unfortunately, what we've seen over the past 20 years is a constant dramatic devaluing of music.
But devaluing of human beings across the board, right? I mean,
Well,
I I don't know about you, but COVID-19, regardless of what's going on, I think over the past few years, you and I have seen a lot of disparity where you put daddy's son in charge of the company and they're the CEO and they got the title and they make sure that they're okay, but they really don't care about the regular worker who's got to put food on the table. Listen, you can only make so much money, Robert, and you can only do so much with it, right? And you can't take it with you. So to me, the biggest loser is the richest guy in the cemetery, and it's a selfish way to be. And whatever your belief system is, I think that we as people have a duty and obligation to take care of the things that are put in front of us. When we see a wrong, it's not somebody else's job to make it right.
Well,
And
you would think that with what we've been going through as a world with this pandemic, that those kinds of sobering thoughts would enter the conversation everywhere. And to some extent they have, but to a greater extent, maybe because of the administration that we're all suffering under here, it seems to fall on deaf ears.
well, I guess regardless of the administration, it's pretty much the same stuff year after year. We expect it to change dramatically, but it never does. And by the way, one thing that aggravated me was I was on YouTube, and I'm going to play "I'm Falling Off the World" right now, which is, I guess, apropos for what we're talking about. Immediately, one of the candidates, and I'm not going to say who, came up on YouTube, and it's probably not who you think. And I'm thinking to myself, come on now. I don't want to hear this stuff. I just want to hear the music. But I guess with YouTube, you got to sit there and watch the commercials. Yeah.
Well, the good news is that probably within 5 seconds you can click out of the commercial.
Yes, but it was still on there, and it just, I got to tell you, I'm not a fan of politicians. I don't care what label
I'm
they
with
are.
you on that.
I think I can manage my own stuff, and I can ruin my own stuff without anybody's help. I could do it.
Right.
I don't need. I'm not one of those people that seek to be led. I don't need a leader. You know what I mean? I don't really. I prefer what we're doing now. I'm in my room. You're in your room. We're having a nice conversation. We're making each other laugh. I'm trying to sell cases of Dr. Pepper to people in Texas who don't have it, and we're playing some great tunes.
As Bob Dylan once said, don't follow leaders, watch your parking meters.
This world keeps spinning round.
I'm falling off the world. That's great. Love that song. We'll talk
Thank you.
about some of the members of your group there in a little bit. I did notice one thing. I find it very interesting. The bass that you're playing. That's a 6-string bass? 5-string.
Five
Okay.
string.
I wasn't sure. I couldn't count that fast because, you're wailing on it. But I thought, hey, man, awesome. I always felt, especially when I pick up the bass, I'm like, man, I feel like I'm shortchanged. Only 4 strings. You got 6, 12. What's the advantage to having a 5-string bass? How does that affect how you play it, your approach? Because you got that one kid out there somewhere who's crazy like you that wants to be the bass player.
Well, the difference between the 5-string and the 4-string is you've got this lower string that gives you like the real ballsy sound on the very bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And most bass players have a handful of 4-string and 1 or 2 5-strings. I'm not a big fan of 6 strings, and there's some basses that are even more than that. Because they're adding strings on the upper end. I kind of like having something on the lower end. Anyway, that's the one that I had in the bunker with me when we did the when we did the video. It's not actually the bass that I used on the recording, but I used it for the video.
Yeah, that's cool. I want to talk about the bass player because when I was having conversations as a kid, and I don't know if we spoke about this in the past, we'd always have who's the best guitar player of all time, who's the best vocalist of all time, the best drummer of all time. And it was always the same 4 or 5 guys that would make the list. And when it comes to the best bass players of all time, um, give me 3 that's on your list. It doesn't have to be necessarily 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but at least 3, maybe more that's on your list of great bass players. And it
Well,
could be any genre.
sure. I mean, number one is a guy named Jaco Pastorius, who was tragically died early, but he played with Weather Report. He played with many others back in the day. Just a wonderful, wonderful electric bass player. Another one of my personal favorites was Jack Bruce, who played with Cream. Um, Victor Wooten is a guy today that's just amazing. Stanley Clarke is amazing. Paul McCartney is an incredible bass player. Doesn't get the credit from a lot of people that he should get for just how creative he was. And of course, for us bass players, there are guys like from Motown, James Jamerson, who was kind of everybody's favorite bass player back in the 60s, even though we didn't know that it was him that was playing. Carol Kay, a lady who was playing bass on so many of the Wrecking Crew
Yes.
things that came out.
Yeah.
I mean, really great bass players. The thing about the bass is in popular music, it forms with the drums the foundation of the song. So for people that are not musicians, they're probably feeling it but not really thinking about it or noticing it unless there's a particular bass line that's the focus of the song. But believe me, if it wasn't being done correctly and if it wasn't being done together with the drums, that they would know something was wrong. Now, when you get into more creative things like jazz or jazz fusion that I got into when I was younger, well, then you could see the way that the bass became not just a solo instrument, but how it led the band and led the music in so many directions. And frankly, that's the way I play myself. The foundation of Project Grand Slam, I think, is the rhythm section. It's me and my drummer Joel Mateo, and my percussionist Guillermo Barron. The 3 of us basically lead every song wherever we're going. And in fact, now that we're recording remotely, I'm recording in the way that people have recorded popular music forever, which is, track by track. And you always start with the rhythm section when you're doing it that way.
Yeah, believe it or not, you start usually with the drums, then the bass comes later. So drums or bass, I don't know, like they probably go back and forth with that.
You know,
in
it's
the
funny.
order?
Stuart Copeland from the Police. I listened to an interview that he did recently, and he talked about how for all those great songs that were written by Sting and played by the Police, he was recording them before any of the vocals were added. He had no idea what the songs were about. He had no idea what the lyrics were because they hadn't been written yet. So you're right. He led with the drum track.
He's a funny guy. Like I've seen what he writes on his drum skins about Sting in front of him. I always laugh at that. He really doesn't like him all that much, apparently, because he writes nasty things. And I think that's the way to like really get your frustration, because when he's playing the drums, he's seeing Sting's face, you know, and he's getting away with beating the crap out of Sting.
Well,
No, it's just an observation I made.
uh-huh.
You might have a different observation, but
No,
I've
no,
seen
no.
it.
Listen, I think that the three of them were incredible musicians. You know, it's funny. There are some bands that I did not get into at the time that they were most popular, just because I was into other things at the time, and there were so many bands coming up and doing great things that how did you get into every one of them? The Police, for me, happened to be one of those bands that at the time I just didn't know that they were around. Another band that I thought turned out to be a marvelous band that I wasn't into because I just didn't know them was Queen.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I
And
mean,
Brian May from Queen is one of the great guitarists of rock and roll. Just a tasteful, beautiful guitarist. And of course, Freddie Mercury was Freddie Mercury. But you know, I they just passed me by at the time. So afterwards, I got into them and I said, "Gee, these guys were terrific."
I have my own list of bass players. Paul McCartney's number one because what you said, and he's more of an instrumentalist. It seems like Paul McCartney can play any instrument, and it seems like he's been playing it for years. On the Ballad of John and Yoko, I do believe it's just him and John, and you got Paul playing the drums and the bass, and God knows what else is on.
Well, when he did his first solo album, McCartney, I believe he played everything on the album.
Yeah, see,
And that
I
was the
wish I
one
could
that
do
had
that.
Baby I'm Amazed on it. It's just a phenomenal record. The guy's incredibly talented.
Then I have Chris Squire from Yes.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you know
Let me
why?
tell you a
Because
little
he
story.
go ahead.
When Yes came out with that song Roundabout, um, and he's the bass part of Roundabout was one of those bass parts that everybody just took notice of. Okay.
Mhm.
And of course at the time, I'm much younger and I'm trying to learn and develop, and I'm saying to myself, how in the world did this guy play that? That was one of those like ear opening events.
Yep. John Paul Jones, another one. Boom, 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 boom. Dazed and Confused, by the way, which was recorded by the Yardbirds with totally different lyrics. I don't know if
Totally
you're aware of
different.
that.
Totally different. I
So,
just to point that out, I did a song on East Side Sessions. Every album, I like to take a song from the 60s and kind of do it my way. And so I finally reached to Mount Everest this time around, and I took a Beatles song. But I didn't want to take a Beatles song that everybody knew because it would be like tampering with God. So I took one of their older songs, in fact, something that came out of A Hard Day's Night, and it was sung by Ringo. And it was a song called I Want to Be Your Man, which I
oh
always
yeah,
loved. Now, I Want to Be Your Man, as it is, turned out to be the first single ever released by the Rolling Stones. The
that's
Beatles,
right.
the
Yeah, I
Beatles
forgot
gave that
about that.
song to the Rolling Stones. They put it out, didn't really go anywhere. And then, of course, the Beatles released it with Ringo singing it. And I said, okay, I'll be number 3 on that list. And so we did that on the new album.
Well, it is a fantastic album. You can go to projectgrandslam.com and get whatever you want. You got more than one album there. There's good stuff. And then you had that one album that went to number one in
Yeah,
2018.
yeah.
2018.
We had an
Yeah.
album called Trippin' that just hit the right spot at the right time and went to number 1 on one of the Billboard charts, which was really, really lovely.
That's got to make you feel good. Anytime you get a number one like that, sort of, you know, you know, it's not necessary to validate your career to have a number one of anything, but man, it certainly has to help. When you can just look in the mirror and go, "Hey, say what you want about me. I had a #1 album on the charts."
Well, you're right, and you know, it's. I'm sure for some people, they looked at it and they said, "Well, who are these masked men? You know, where did they come from? Who are these guys?" But you know, it went to #1 and it stayed up in the top 10 for at least a couple of months, I believe. So it was really lovely.
I'm going to ask you a question, and if you remember it, well, you'll blow me away. But before we get to that, I've noticed one thing that most kids do. My daughter, I've done it. A lot of friends have done it. They pick up a guitar or a bass, and there's that one song that every kid starts to play. What do you think that song is?
Louie Louie.
Now, Smoke on the Water. Boom, 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 boom. It's
That's
just
true.
so much fun. I mean, right? I mean, that is
Well,
one of those
the other
things.
one is Sunshine of Your Love. Da da
Well,
da 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 da
dun,
da
dun,
da
dun, dun,
da
dun. Oh,
da.
yeah, all right. I get you there. I think Smoke on the Water is just a little bit easy. You could do it with one string, right? Bum, bum, bum. And then you think you're a big deal. Hey, man, check this out. I can play Smoke on the Water, man. Um, yeah. And then, you know, this is the time of year where I hear stories about Woodstock. You talked about the tickets. You know, how that guy had that one ticket that was really valuable. Take us back to your Woodstock experience, if you have one, or if you even remember it, or, you know, make up something.
Now I'll tell you my real Woodstock experience. I was playing in the show band of a hotel in the Catskill Mountains that summer. You remember the Catskill Mountains? They used to have
Of
hotels
course.
all over the
Yeah.
place. Of course, none of them are left, which is really, really unfortunate. But it's a beautiful area, and I was playing in the show band of the Olympic Hotel in South Fallsburg. The show band was the premier job in the whole joint because we had the whole day off. We used to have a rehearsal at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Every night there were two acts that came on, you know, for the show. One was a comedian, and the other was a singer. And they did it every single night. So the singer would come in with his or her charts, and they would distribute the charts. And you know, at 4 o'clock, we'd run through the set that the singer was going to do. So you had to actually sight read the charts, and you know that was a bit of a challenge for me, but I got through it. Anyway, we found out that their Woodstock was taking place, and that they moved it to Bethel, New York, which is right near Monticello. And we were only about 20 minutes from Monticello. So the week before Woodstock, I got in a car with a couple of friends of mine, and we went through the back roads just to kind of see what was happening, and you know, was this really going to happen? And we came up on the back road that led just behind the stage, and they were building the stage, and the stage looked out to this gigantic hill that went up, of course, and it was just beautiful. You know, the sun was shining, the setting was just gorgeous. We said, okay, this is going to be really interesting. So we went out and we bought tickets for one day, which was Sunday. It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday concert. We bought for Sunday. Why? Because I had to work Friday night, I had to work Saturday night, and I figured, you know, I'll be available for Sunday. So, you know, Woodstock started taking place. Of course, we found out after the first night that they ignored all the days and the nights. They were just going right through. But I remember so clearly. We came Sunday morning. We took those same back roads, so we were able to get, you know, within about a quarter of a mile of the site, even though cars were
Right.
everywhere.
You
People
stayed
were.
off 17B. You went up the
Yeah,
back.
we
Yeah, I know
went
where
through the back
exactly.
roads.
Yeah.
And we walked in and we positioned ourselves just to the side of the stage at the moment that Joe Cocker was going on with his band. And to my mind, there was no better moment in the entirety of Woodstock than Joe Cocker singing with a little help from my friends.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree.
and you know, to this day, I absolutely remember being in the audience and being mesmerized by that. And here's the kicker. The kicker is, I mentioned just before with you, Zach, that I like to take these 1960s songs and kind of redo them as my own. Well, where did I get the idea for that from? It really started with Joe Cocker's rendition of "With a Little Help from My Friends." I mean, he took that song off of Sergeant Pepper and he redid it completely as his own. And there's
Did he
only a
also? Yeah, and did he also go? She came in through the bathroom window. Didn't
well,
he
he
do
did.
that too?
Yes, he did
Yeah.
that as well. Look, he did a fair number of covers, but that song played the way it was. It basically created a new song. And I said to myself, when I play covers, people talk
Mhm.
about covers, just playing somebody else's song. To me, if all you're doing is playing somebody else's song exactly the way that they played it, well, what's the point of that?
No, there is
Okay.
no point. In
Well,
fact, I could talk of a few besides with a little help from my friends and Joe Cocker. I know where you were too. You were at stage left coming up after the little trees, and there's like a little creek that's on the left. So you got to see Joe Cocker a little bit closer than everybody else,
wait a minute,
right?
was that you that was there?
No, I just know I know the topography because I'm an idiot. These are the kind of things I know. I used to take before my daughter was born. Of course, I knew about the Woodstock story, and my aunt Reggie, she went there. I was too young, but I know the area very well. It's a natural amphitheater, which they did a great job of finding the spot, and you could see how everybody can go up on the side of the hill, and you're down there, and there's trees towards what would have been the back of the stage, and right next to the trees there's a creek that goes right by. I guess that's where all the kids were washing, and on the other side is the actual farm house or the actual barn. um, so I'm just thinking where you were at that time, 50 years ago, you'd be right over on stage left, looking up towards the rest of the crowd with Joe Cocker as you look towards the left. Am I right about that?
You probably are.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, last year, apropos of the discussion, my wife and I took a ride. First, we went to Cooperstown, Baseball Hall of
Yes.
Fame, because I hadn't been there in a million years, and that was a beautiful trip. And from there, it's not too far away from the whole area where Woodstock is. So we actually drove to Woodstock. They've taken the event space and they've made it into like a shrine.
Yes, they have. Yeah.
They've got a concert venue. Guys like Ringo play there every year. It's a beautiful setting,
It's
and
very
you can
nice.
go. You can actually see, the hillside and where the stage was and all of that. And this is one of those things. They talk about eyewitness testimony as being completely unreliable in court. And I can understand why, because I had this image in my mind of exactly what the whole thing looked like because I was there. And when we went back, I had it all wrong.
Well, here's the thing. You can look at it. Everybody can experience the same thing. And by the way, in the background, I don't know if you're hearing the car horns. It's a popular thing when somebody's celebrating a birthday or a big moment under the lockdown that people go by the person's house, and there's a little 10-year-old down the block, and it says, "Happy birthday, Nate," I do believe. And all these cards are out in the lawn, and there must have been at least 30 cars. This kid and motorcycles, this kid must be well liked. I have to go and say hi to him myself. I mean, what a great birthday. I mean, it's just one car after another going by. Oh, wow, that's a Jaguar. Holy cow. Anyway, I don't know if you could hear it, but that's pretty cool. Bravo. Very nice. People are being nice neighbors. Anyway, back to the Woodstock and being a witness. Yeah, I mean, you and I can experience the same exact event, but explain it completely differently. The portrait or the painting that's behind you somebody would say, "Oh, it's just a clump of trees," where I could say, "Well, I see something that's brown and it's like a straight line and a little crooked towards the top and a little bit green and the leaves are white." And I can be more descriptive in what my take is. It doesn't make you any worse of an eyewitness or any better than an eyewitness than I am. We just see it differently. Sort of like how we experience music, we all experience it in our own way. And that is what I really like about Project Grand Slam is when you put on the album, you're really getting, you know, something, you're getting more than your money's worth.
Right.
And sonically, it's amazing. The talent level on the record is phenomenal. You got a bunch of young people on it, and that's refreshing because you could see that they're a group of people that you've assembled. And I know how you're able to do it, that all share that same passion for the music. So let's spend a little time on the rest of your band so they can get a nod, a wink and a nod for the great work that they've done, because it's a tight band. You got it nice and tight.
Yeah, it's a true collaboration, and I appreciate that you focused on it. Look, I feel very, very fortunate. The folks that I've got in the band they've been with me for the most part for quite a long time. We're very, very tight as a band. I do make some changes every now and then, but the core of the band has been with me for years, and it's allowed me the freedom to create as I like to do. Um, I started out with Project Grand Slam. I formed the band originally in 2007, and at the time that I formed it, um, it was basically a contemporary jazz group, and we were playing instrumental music. Uh, the band has evolved from there into a situation where now it's almost all vocal music. And I've really let my rock and roll past and my chops come to the fore, because the kind of things that I'm writing now are much more rock and pop oriented with a jazz tinge or involvement, um, which makes us pretty interesting and pretty unique. The only one I can equate it to is a group like Blood, Sweat, and Tears, or originally the way Chicago was, because you know, those bands were made up of really fine musicians, and they really did kind of integrate both rock and jazz together, and that's what I try and do with this band. And I've added a whole um, kind of Latin sound into it as well, because several of the folks in the band have Latin backgrounds. So my drummer is Joel Mateo. He's from Puerto Rico, just a fantastic, fantastic drummer. My percussionist is, as I said, is Guillermo Barón Rios. He's from Mexico. I have two keyboard players because I love them both.
I
Uh,
noticed that.
one
I
is
did notice that. Yeah.
one is Baden Goyo from Venezuela. The other is Marcello Casagrande, who's actually from Cuba by way of Italy. And then I've got my guitar player is from Western Canada. His name is Tristan Clark. And my sax player is from Dallas, Texas. So his name is Alex Blade, and Alex Blade Silver, I should have said. And my singer is a wonderful, wonderful lady named Marilyn Castillo. Marilyn is also Mexican American. So you can see that there's a real international flavor to the band. And I like to say I carry on that international flavor because I'm from Queens, New York. But I try to make use of the talents and the backgrounds of the players that I work with, because, you know, particularly on the Latin side, this is their music. So, and I came to Latin music because my father was a musician, and my father used to listen to the Spanish stations on the radio all the time. And so I listened to those stations as well. And, you know, if you grow up in New York City and you hear Spanish music the whole time, it gets in your system.
It's part of your musical DNA.
That's
Well,
exactly
Robert,
right.
thanks for spending time with us today. Before we leave, one final thing we're going to play I'm Falling Off the World one more time for everybody's listening pleasure.
Hey, Zach, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. And away we go. How sweet it is.